We are live in the Age Tech podcast studio. This is Pitchdeck Asia. My name is Graham Brown. Sitting opposite Phay, founder at Lumin, research scholar at NTU. We're going to talk about AI, creativity and predictive analytics. Han, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you here. Unpack first. Where are you from?
I'm from Singapore.
Born and bred?
Born and bred here. Went for my national service and then I went to Hong Kong to do my undergrad.
Right, okay. So you studied in Hong Kong?
So I studied in Hong Kong. I was there for about 4 years.
Yeah. What did you study?
I did a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Advertising.
Right, interesting.
So
Fine arts in advertising?
Fine arts. So I started off in a design background.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of drawing classes, design classes. So I was sort of trained in that sort of designer perspective.
Right. In advertising?
In advertising.
So like traditional ad print and...
So across all formats,
Right.
digital, print,
Okay.
posters,
Yeah.
everything.
Right.
So we had to learn everything related even to the basics of design. What is a good composition? What kind of colors goes well together? So in fact, design itself has a lot of theories involved.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
So would you describe yourself in essence as a designer, a creative?
In essence, I am
Yeah.
a designer.
Yeah.
In fact, right now I'm doing my research at NTU. It's basically under the art, design and media faculty. But my research is involving how can we use this artificial intelligence to actually tap into this creative area. So it's sort of like a hybrid of technology and design for me.
Right. So obviously people are going to be scratching their heads when you talk
Right.
about AI and creativity, because often they're seen as two opposites, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But once you start sort of unpacking it a little bit, you understand that a lot of creativity is simply pattern recognition, and then you're adding this sort of human element on top, right? Which is sort of that magic which maybe can't captured by AI. Or
Correct,
not.
that's right.
Okay. So we're going to go there. Let's talk about what market we're in and Lumin first. So Lumin, did that come out of NTU, that startup? And just sort of put it into context, because they have their own accelerator there as well, right?
Right. So I think just a quick background on how we got this startup running. I started my research scholarship at NTU. I was doing research for about a year. And then I went to this SUTD. So actually we are NTU and SUTD startup.
Right, can you explain SUTD
Yeah.
for those who might not be based in
So
Singapore?
SUTD is the Singapore University of Technology and Design. They focus a lot on technology stuff, cybersecurity, emerging technologies. So I actually went there and I did a short course on artificial intelligence. And in fact, I connected with a few people there who are actually right now my co-founders.
Right, so you all met at SUTD.
Yes.
Why did you take a course in AI when you were a designer? What was the logical or even emotional journey
The
there?
logic was that I was doing research relating to how we can apply AI to creativity. And I found that, at least for myself, I had to have a fundamental understanding of how AI worked. Before then, I could use it in my research to apply it to design.
Great.
Yeah.
Excellent. So your team came out of SUTD. You are just under a year old.
We actually only incorporated in August of this year.
Okay.
So we are still an early stage startup. Right now, we are focusing a lot on especially building up the MVP. Because to do something relating to AI at the MVP level takes a substantial amount of involvement and time.
Yeah, testing for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's have a little walk through your pitch deck. Maybe we can put all this into context, look at the market, the problem, the solution, and so on. I'd like to start, I'm going to jump right to the end of the pitch deck, if I may.
Sure.
Han. And right at the end here, we have, I've overshot it a little bit. We've got the team. I'm going to look for your market. Here we go. There is a slide.
This is the edited deck, actually.
Okay, so
we can talk about the market sizing.
Right. I'm trying to find, I've got it down here as slide 19, but it's not slide 19, unless this has changed since, okay. All right, so there was the original deck, which had your market size. I want to understand, maybe you can talk to us, I think it might be before your case studies.
Sure.
Is that what market are you actually in? So how do you describe your market? What is your market first?
So right now, I think we look at the advertising spend.
Right.
As per the international spend on advertising, we're looking at a value of about 558 billion since last year.
Right. So your market is advertising.
My market is advertising spend.
Yeah.
That is a global market. In fact, right now, based on my research, 90% of advertising spend is being earned by the technology companies,
Right.
Google and Facebook. So they're like tech companies, but they've angled themselves as a advertising company of sorts these days.
Yeah.
And only 10% of the current ad spend goes to the traditional ad agencies.
Right.
So what Luminaire actually we're trying to do is, in order to compete with the tech giants, we have to evolve the advertising agency model into more of something like a tech company.
Mm-hmm.
So my market is actually the advertising spend.
Mm.
So it's a portion of the advertising spend. So it's a portion of that 90% that is being taken by the tech companies.
Right. Still 60 billion, 55 billion. It's big enough to play with. All right. What is the problem? And I'm going to jump back into your pitch deck. Hopefully it's the same slides that we had, because I know you had a slightly edited version.
Yeah, there's different version.
Okay. What is the problem with all of this? So there's a $550 billion market.
Yes.
Okay. Why does it need to be changed, or what do you want to do with it? What is the problem that's out there?
So going back to actually the premise of it, actually from my research, my topic was actually about the advertising content.
Mm.
So in fact, actually right now, if you look at the advertising technology sector, we are putting a lot of emphasis on this advertising placement. So we are actually targeting advertisements to people who are on technology websites, people who are on very particular websites if we're selling a very specific product. But what is being overlooked, I think, a lot is the content of the advertising. Because advertising itself is a combination of various subconscious decisions that as consumers we make.
Mm-hmm.
We may look at certain colors and it may trigger certain emotions within us. So my argument here is that the content is equally as important as the placement.
Mm.
So right now what's happening is that in the online space, increasing number of consumers is increasing year by year. They're actually installing ad blockers onto their computers. So people are actually choosing to block ads from websites because the ads are annoying to them. It's too much, and it becomes sort of like a background noise. So because of that, a lot of consumers, and especially the advertisers, they are not able to reach out to these consumers who are blocking their advertisements because these consumers are just not engaged at all.
So what do you need to do? How do you fix that?
So how we fix this is that we then think of the design of the advertisement and we optimize the content of it.
Right. Okay. So let's just summarize. The problem is, well, there's a $550 billion market out there. A lot of it is owned by the big tech guys.
Right.
However, an increasing number of people are blocking their advertising because it's just not relevant or the content's not good. So what you're saying is that if we optimize that content, we can address that.
Yes, you can in fact actually get more engaged consumers because right now a lot of time in terms of online advertising, we judge success based on certain metrics like impressions or clicks, or at the peak we have conversions where people actually purchase a product.
Yeah.
So the idea of optimizing content is then to use the advertisement as a platform to tell an engaging story that then gets more consumers to actually convert and purchase a product.
Right.
To turn them into sort of like a fan of a brand. And that's something that a company like Apple, for example, has done very well because they tell such a unique story to their customer that they feel that they are part of this ecosystem or movement. So that's the important part. And fundamentally, I think the design itself, even though it's very minute factors, it could be things like color combinations or the types of fonts being used. Even small details like this can affect subconsciously a consumer's look or outlook towards a particular brand.
Right. So in the current status of the market with digital advertising, most advertisers, most merchants are advertising like they would direct mail. It's just putting messages up there. It's transactional. Yet what you're saying is there's something missing here, which is bringing across that sort of creative advertising mindset from the old world before it went digital. You talked about brand building, storytelling, engaging, and so on.
Yes.
Most people haven't really... I guess what I'm trying to get to is your hypothesis about how you're doing different is that you're saying that that sort of small amount of real estate on the mobile phone or on the website can be used to build brands and creatives in the same way that creative agencies like the Ogilvies and the Leo Burnett's always have done for years and years, right?
Because if we look at advertising agencies, their main business is storytelling.
Yeah.
They're trying to convey a brand story or a history or legacy. But if you look at ads in the past, if we look at the Mad Men era, advertising then, usually, if we look at the formats, is on print. Firstly, we are not able to target. So, of course, they had to spend a lot of effort in telling a good story. And if we look at early advertising, we can see that early advertising is very copy-driven. So we can see like a full-page copy text. That right now, the modern consumer would not even look at a text that is more than two sentences long. So now advertising is about catching people's attention to the visuals. Because we have become so visual, with the television, with the internet. We've become so everything is around us that is moving, it's trying to catch our attention. And how do we then get a consumer to actually look at a piece of advertisement and derive some sort of story from it, rather than just a filler noise?
Why do I need story, though? Because I could argue, rightly or wrongly, put me in my place, I could argue that if I can show you an ad,
right,
it's just a few lines, a Google ad, and that clicks through to a landing page, and you convert. I get you onto a list. I then hit you on the list with an offer, and you buy something.
Right.
Where's the story? Why do I need a story in that? It's just pure transaction. I'm just pushing you through a funnel to this end result.
Yeah, I think also you have to consider that if you're trying to sell a particular product, there's probably another 10 or 100 companies trying to sell that same product.
Oh, without a doubt, yeah.
So how then, as a brand, would you stand out in terms not just the placement, but the design of it?
Yeah.
Because the design of it can actually tell a story that makes your brand stand apart from the rest. So my argument here is that the small details, the colors, the design theories, the way words are joined together, the copywriting, everything comes together in a complete package.
Right.
And in fact, if we look at two advertisements, one may perform better even though they spend less on an advertisement because the content of it is very attractive. Right now, we have a very international and global market. So there are people from different backgrounds, cultures, environments who grew up in a different way. They may engage with stories in a different manner. So that's where big data helps us, right? Because big data can give us information about where someone grew up, what's their location, and then how can we tell a story that's relevant to them. For example, if we look at certain countries, they may prefer the color green or the color red. So if we can actually generate advertisements that are, let's say, 70% predominantly green in those markets, for example, Indonesia, then we can actually relate to them on a cultural level because they use the green color so much in their own cultural festivities and all. So then we use small design decisions like this to actually use it in the generation and creation of advertisements. And that will actually increase the chance that they would actually look at it or they would click on it or they would actually purchase something from it.
Yeah, interesting. There's a lot of variables going on, isn't there, when you're doing advertising?
Right. So a lot of it is actually very subconscious as well.
Yeah.
So we may look at something, this idea of taste, aesthetic preference, when we go to an art museum, we go to the Louvre, we look at the Mona Lisa, we may like it, we may not like it. But the fact is that what causes us to like or not, it is a multiple factors. Cultural upbringing, it's just personal taste. And taste itself is something that cannot be quantified.
Yeah, and it's shaped by story.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So storytelling, I mean, it's the basis of how humans have communicated
We're the storytelling ape, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like they say. Yeah, I mean, yes, I'm a believer in storytelling. Absolutely. It's great to hear this. And that brings us to the interesting conversation about storytelling and AI.
Yeah.
Let's hold that. We'll get to that in a minute. Let's jump in and have a look at the pitch deck as well. Conscious of the fact that it might not be the right slide, but I want to get to the solution slide, which in the old pitch deck was slide 8. So maybe we can just sort of, now it's moved around a little bit, but what is the solution? So maybe we can, well, there's a few case studies in here. I'll jump back to where we started. You can tell us what the solution is. So we've set out the story context, which is, here's the market, here's what everybody else is doing, here's your argument, which is, this is how you can do it differently. Right. You've mentioned all the factors involved in that. What is your solution? So
right now, we're actually building a software as a service. So it's an enterprise software. And this enterprise software is able to be used by SMEs or startups, people who require churning out of advertisements for their products. So I would say B2C customers who are trying to sell products, and they actually may not have the capacity or the financials to hire a full-scale advertising agency. So then, how can we reduce the cost on an entire advertising agency process? In fact, an advertising agency does a whole scale of work end-to-end. They begin by doing market research to understand the consumer problems, how the consumer would most likely be reached, and then they move and translate that into this thing called a creative brief, which is then fed into the creative teams. So there's a creative director, art director, and a copywriter who then actually looks at the brief and says, what is the best design solution to solve this problem, to get the consumer to buy your product? So then it's an entire end-to-end process that every advertising campaign takes a lot of people, maybe up to 10 people, from the account executives to the media planners to the designers and art directors. So then how can we condense that into software as a service powered by AI that can then generate the market insights and transfer it into a design of advertisement?
Can that process create a big idea? Like, I mean, there's that big... I mean, the big idea in advertising is a thing, right? I mean, you go back to the Leo Burnett days, and
yes,
you know, there's creating this big idea. What is the big idea about this brand? Whether it's you know, Tony the Tiger or Diamonds Are Forever, these sort of like classic ad campaigns, right?
Yeah.
And I suppose if you speak to the madmen or the people who sort of, you know, think of that world, is that they'll always pull out their favorite campaign, and these are the ones that they often sort of talk about, right? Right. Can it do that? Do we need it? I suppose that's the question we've got to ask. Or can it be sort of more of the AI-driven, subtle design, you know, variables which you can change?
So the idea is that, I think the argument here is that advertising agencies are still useful to us in the modern day because of the big idea. So things like the example you said, the Diamonds Are Forever, that's a DBS advertisement where actually they transformed the entire jewelry industry. They created value on something that back then was not that valuable. Yeah,
people didn't have diamonds back then. They had emeralds
and now it became like sort of a culture where you have to propose and with an engagement ring.
Yeah, 3 months salary and all that stuff.
Yeah, that shows how powerful advertising can be. Just look at Nike with their tagline, "Just do it." It's just 3 very simple words, but it creates an entire campaign about overcoming the odds, about becoming a hero of your own story. Yeah. I think there's a lot behind those simple words or design decisions that then, you know, it can influence the entire generation. So I'm saying right now that the artificial intelligence itself, it's still not able to create this big idea. But what it can be utilized for right now is we're looking at areas like high churn advertisements. So advertisements, if I'm an e-commerce store, I'm constantly having promotions, Christmas promotions, New Year's promotion. How then do I optimize the design to attract the customers that I want to talk to?
Got it.
So I'm looking at a dynamic system. So a vision of the future where the advertisement actually is evolving. Everywhere you go, the advertisement evolves. So if I'm showing a piece of advertisement for Chinese New Year, for example, I would look at the demographic, I would look at the cultural background of the festival, and then the advertisement will relate to that. It relates in terms of the colors used, relates in terms of the fonts used, it relates in terms of the size. The size of the image with the fonts, what is the combination of colors. So there are multiple types of design decisions that actually go into something as simple as a promotional ad.
How much can you personalize that as well? Is that possible? I mean, you're making it dynamic. Yeah. For example, if we know that, Han, you're more likely to click, just for example, an ad that features an Asian face, right? Or you might more like to click one that has like someone with blonde hair and blue eyes. Yes, right? Yes.
So that's like a taste preference, right?
Right. Can you personalize that for advertising? Because that must be the holy grail, right?
Yeah. So that's exactly what we're trying to do. Right. So basically, what happens is we see a world in which all the advertisements you see is something that actually you like in terms of taste. Yeah. So like the example you mentioned, if you're somebody that is more attracted to Asian faces, for example, then the advertisements for the same product you see would feature, for example, someone drinking a bottle of soda who is an Asian face. Right. So in real time, someone who prefers blonde hair, blue eyes, they would see the same advertisement but with a person with blonde hair, blue eyes.
Yeah. And AI, does the heavy lifting, right? Because it can do all that matching.
Yes. Right. In fact, now the latest AI technology is this thing called a GAN. We call it a General Adversarial Network. And this is actually the most one of the most important users of it is in computer vision.
Yeah.
So in fact, they have actually done some examples of actually feeding 100 celebrity photographs into the AI system. And using this GAN analysis, it can then create entirely new faces of people that don't exist.
Yeah.
So then what is the potential when we apply this into the creative fields?
Well, that certainly deals with any kind of like, release rights on faces. Could you just manufacture a face and sell it?
We could manufacture a completely anonymous face that could potentially not belong to anybody.
Yeah, that's fascinating, isn't it? Because then the issue with using faces in advertisement is like, even if you buy it from stock photo websites, is that you don't know if you've got release rights on it. Right. You don't know if that person. Sometimes people have used faces and they're like already celebrities that they don't know. Right? And if you go into another market, oh, that's this local singer. They don't know that, or they've picked up somebody's face, and then you get those families on holiday, they see their face on an ad, and then that reflects badly on the brand because they sue them, right?
Yes, exactly.
So you're saying you can actually create that?
Yeah, so in fact, face generation is one of the current testing and investigation being used on this GAN algorithm. And there's a lot of potential here because we are just looking at faces. But this GAN could potentially simulate even photographs of environments. Yeah. Photographs of how a place looks like. Image of an entire mountainside could all be generated just from feeding a AI algorithm thousands of images, and it can create something entirely new out of it.
Yeah. To do this, you must have a massive data set. You can't just work with like one advertiser, can you? Because
of course,
you've got to have that broad spectrum to pull from in different markets, different cultures, different demographics, and so on.
Exactly.
So how is that going to work? How are you going to tie all this up? You're going to collect all that data and make it cross-transferable. So, if I'm an advertiser, I'm not just working with the data from my customers. Right. I'll be able to pull in all this from all over the world.
So part of what we are doing is that we are trying to build an ecosystem. So an ecosystem of this magnitude that involves different cultures and countries. We require all this cooperation, for example, with the many other clients. So we start off by having a very baseline sort of data set that we can acquire, sort of like consumer behavior, marketing data, etc. And then as we run, this is where the AI deep learning comes in. As we run campaigns for brands or advertisers or companies, we use the AI deep learning system to actually collect the information on how well each advertisement would perform based on our hypothesis. And this hypothesis gets more and more accurate over time.
Right.
So I think that's the really real beauty of the deep learning in AI is that we can then learn from millions of data points and data sets. And this is something that if you ask a human to do, they wouldn't have the kind of accuracy or the speed.
No, there's too much bias in it as well. We've seen this in medicine, for example, with diagnosis. Okay, well, let's have a look at one of your case studies as well, see what the actual results of this are. I want to ask, before we get there, is that, on my mind sort of like weaving in the conversation is that, for example, in advertising, especially online, uses a lot of stock photography.
Right.
Can you, and you're talking about scenes and faces that you can manufacture effectively.
Yes.
No, I'm sort of thinking forward to the future. That could mean the end of stock photography, where you're actually just generating this stuff rather than...
So basically, we are also like a sort of like a stock photography kind of model, whereby advertisers can actually just generate advertising on our platform, and they can just purchase it as a stock photo to use it.
But it doesn't contain a real actor.
Yeah. So
if I say
over time...
I want 3 Asians drinking soda, and they've got to be this age, this demographic.
Exactly. So then it can generate. But one of the factors here to consider is that the whole premise of advertising is to sell the product of a brand. Yeah. So even if I'm a marketing director of a particular brand, I may want certain specifications like what you mentioned, 3 Asian people. But if the data shows that 3 Asian people would not be effective in this market, then the AI would recommend otherwise.
Got it.
So in fact, what it generates actually, it's optimized for the best result in the particular demographic or market that you're selling to.
Right. So if you say... Kodak, and your big idea was share the moment, you could go in with that big idea. I want images of moments. Yeah. And you could somehow feed that into the machine. Yeah. And that would then say, here are moments in different cultures.
So the idea of moments could be, for example, image of a couple sitting by the edge of a mountain overlooking a vista. Yeah. That could be an idea of moments. So that could then be generated by the AI together with the relevant tagline or copywriting using natural language processing. And also things like, placement of the logo, what's the size of the text should be, and it's all generated.
Yeah. Okay. What does Luminaire mean?
So Luminaire, our tagline actually is the future illuminated.
Right.
So sort of, I've always liked sci-fi,
Yeah.
And I guess Luminaire is sort of like a light of the future.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. Okay, yeah, let's go into the case study because
Right.
What you're talking about, there are very interesting long-term applications of
Right.
this, and maybe looking at the case study, we'll sort of dig a little bit into that.
Sure.
But I think, understanding AI, we understand what it can do, but that whole sort of creative area it's been one of those conversations. People say it doesn't belong there, but
Right.
what we're saying is actually there's a huge role for it. But at the same time, it doesn't replace human beings. It replaces some human beings who are just doing the box filling, the pattern matching. But for those who are doing this sort of top level big idea stuff,
Right.
they become even more valuable, right?
Exactly. I feel that AI actually takes a lot of this kind of very menial and
Yeah.
unfulfilling work out of the hands of human beings.
Right.
So in a way, I see it as a positive thing,
Yeah. There was a guy who had to, in the old days, phone round all the old school stock photography companies and say, "Have you got a photo of 3 Asians?" That's what it would have been in the old days,
Exactly.
and that was taken online, but still somebody doing it, right?
Yeah, and now you don't even need to take a photo of it anymore.
There you go. You don't even need 3 Asians. We'll
Exactly.
make them for you. All right, okay. Let's have a look at the case study so we can jump in. You've got a couple of cases.
Sure.
So tell us a little bit. Diapex.
So Diapex actually, this is actually one of our first tests
Yeah.
users to generate some sort of advertisement format using this brand called Diapex.
Right.
So
A little bit of context. So
sure.
some people can't see this case study. So Diapex, nappies, diapers. So it's obvious from the
diapers,
screen, but for
Yeah.
those listening, right?
Sure.
Okay.
So Diapex is actually a baby diaper brand.
Yeah.
It's quite popular. It's under this company called NTPM Berhad.
Mhm.
It's a Malaysian company. And they distribute a lot, to supermarkets like NTUC FairPrice, Cold Storage, etc.
Mhm.
So we did this test experiment by first looking at input. Because when we want to generate something from an AI system, we always need an input.
Yeah.
How do we categorize it? So if we look at very simple things like age group, gender, what's their location, and also things like product category. For example, if I'm selling a diaper, I may want to use certain design decisions. If I'm selling an energy drink, I may want certain design decisions. And of course, we also look at some of their current branding collaterals that they use. Because the hard part of advertising is how do we reach out to the right consumer audience, attract their attention, and also retain the brand image that they have been using for a long time. So in this study, we had 2 examples. For example, a female Singaporean or male Singaporean who is actually buying the diapers. So how then would the AI generate the advertisements to appeal to them?
Yeah.
So
Maybe go to the next slide.
So yeah, these are some very rough generations of what the AI is generating. We can see that actually it affects things like colors. It affects things like the type of imagery used, and it affects things like the tagline. So for example, for the father, the tagline would say a baby's best fit, a daddy's best fix. So the beauty of where AI can go with this is that these are just 2 of the samples. In fact, when we generate a single batch, we can generate up to 100 of these sort of variations in a matter of seconds.
And so these are just generated as hypotheses in a way. How does it actually know that was the right thing to generate? Because you've got to feed that back
Exactly.
in, right?
So that's where the deep learning comes in. So what happens is, let's say when we put these ads out into the online market, so then we track the engagement of it. So when we look at engagement, we look at things like impressions, we look at things like clicks, we look at things like purchase or conversions, and we give a certain point system to these engagement levels accordingly. So every cycle that we put out a piece of advertisements, the deep learning then feeds back what is the success ratio of these advertisements, and then it identifies why it did not perform that well. It could be a certain color combination, it could be the choice of words used. So in the next iteration, when they put out another ad, the AI then optimizes it again. So the next cycle becomes more and more accurate towards what the consumer wants.
Right. This is like in the old school AI of genetic algorithms. Isn't
Right,
it? It's like coming up with like different versions, the children of the mother, advert, if you like, and then giving different variations and then culling the non-performing ones, right?
So actually, we can go to the next slide. There's some other samples. So we can look at whole things like broad categories. So we have an idea of the banking vertical. So a banking vertical may have certain design rule sets, like more luxurious kind of fonts. Are we targeting a high net worth client? Are we targeting a common market? These factors affect the design decisions that the AI makes.
So are those programmed top down into the algorithm, do you have to, because you have a background in design
Right.
as well, you in your head you have those top-down decisions like
Yes.
design should be like this,
Yes.
and at the same time this is sort of coming bottom-up, learning like the local maximums, if you like, of
Yeah.
the search.
So
Do you give it an architecture to start
right.
with?
So I think that's a very good question. For any AI system to start, we have to do some labeling ourselves. So we need to start it off with a certain kind of rule set. So it's just like imagine like a primary school student learning the basics of maths or science in class. So in a way, the AI system at the start is almost without any knowledge.
Yeah.
So then we teach it some basic rule sets. It could be design principles. It could be data from past engagements. And then the AI slowly learns from there. So I would say a good example is AI may start with 50% predictive accuracy. And over a period of time, maybe between a year and a half, it can increase up to 70% predictive accuracy. And it gets more and more accurate over time, up to a maximum of 99%. So I think it's an evolution.
Absolutely, that's how evolution works, right?
Yeah.
Even like with, children when they're born, they only have like a certain amount hardwired, and the rest they have to learn, right? You have to have that sort of flexibility,
Correct.
plasticity, I think it's called in AI world. That it has to be in there so that they can learn that, but it has to have a hardwired set as well. Otherwise, it's just going to be completely random, and you don't have like 1,000 years to kind of like go through all the data.
Of course.
To eventually get some kind of like meaningful results, right? Well, what are you discovering? In doing this, you have your sort of top down. You are a designer. You have learned the basics, and you've studied design for generations of like previous advertising. What have you learned in doing this process? Have you learned new things about design and advertising and creatives that have sort of challenged your own assumptions?
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things that I discovered is that actually sometimes good design does not translate to good market response. So I think this goes back to the idea that sometimes from a designer perspective, we look at things from, let's say, a concept art or high art.
Yeah.
If I look at a painting by or a sculpture by Jeff Koons, for example, I may not like it, I may like it, but it's considered high art, right? So oftentimes, this concept of high art is usually pushed upon the masses. And same for advertising. There are often times where there are fantastic advertising campaign, very artfully done, really, really well written, but it just goes over the head of so many consumers.
Yeah, it's advertising for advertisers,
yes.
right? Okay.
And in fact, the advertising industry, there's a lot of emphasis put on awards, things like
tell me
Crowbar
about
Awards, the Cannes Lions.
Lion, yeah, exactly.
So then, what is the difference between advertisement and high art? Advertisement is a form of art, yes, but I feel that the primary purpose of it is to derive sales for products. Because in a way, advertising is a directed, goal-driven form of art. It can't be compared to sculptures or paintings.
Yeah.
So then I think one of the interesting things is actually the AI system. It generates without this preference for creating high concepts.
Right.
But rather, it looks at hard data,
results.
and then it creates things that people would actually understand and like.
Yeah.
I think that's the fundamental difference.
Does it then come out with sort of designs which you like, wow, is that really going to work? But it's telling you, look, based on my data, this is going to work.
Right. In fact, what's happening is that a lot of times in advertising, we have this thing called the 180. So what happens in the 180? It's a method of doing conception.
Yeah.
Conceptualizing. So what happens is you take a well-established idea, something that the market would preferably like, would most likely like, and then you flip it on its head. So you do something completely different, completely outrageous, that then gets the result you want because it's so different from what the market is showing. So then the AI can also do that.
Right.
So we can generate a series of advertisements that fulfills the market needs, and we can create 20% of those advertisements that goes completely against norms.
Right.
That could be completely mind-blowing, that you wouldn't expect something like that to appear.
Does the AI know to do that, or do you have to tell it to do the 180? Does it say?
So we tell it to do the 180.
Right.
So we can put sort of like a weightage. Do we want more of a 180 kind, or do we want more of what the data tells us?
Would you expect in the future that the AI could make that decision? Now it's time for a 180?
Eventually, yes. When it gets enough data in its brain and enough experience over time, it can make decisions by itself.
So you're effectively what you're doing in the creative is you are doing what has been done by humans. A lot of the pattern recognition, a lot of the research, the data crunching and so on. Will that then move up that chain of value? You know, what role does the creative director have in this, or will there ever come a time in the life of Luminaire even that way you're doing the creative director's role?
I think for the short future, no, because the AI is not to that level of sophistication where it can make decisions on big ideas. Because end of the day, the AI still relies on the data set. It relies on what the market is telling it. So it goes with design decisions that are based on market. But as I mentioned, advertising is a mix of high art and reaching out to the consumers. So then I think we were going to see a lot more of advertising for its main purpose, which is to sell products, rather than advertising for winning awards. I think that's going to be a slow switch over there. Because in fact, a lot of brands are not very satisfied because they are not getting a lot of feedback in terms of how well their ads are performing. So usually if we put up some ads online, if we go through an intermediary like an agency, usually the reporting of the figures, how well the ad is performing, is not really a factor. It's more about delivering the advertisement. Hey, the marketing director likes it. It looks nice. They think it works. They just put it out. If it doesn't work so well next time, what can we do better? But then that's just a sort of like abstract thought. But going through a deep learning cycle, we look from the facts, the data, what works, what doesn't work, and it iterates accordingly. And the changes might be very minute. It could just be a font type change. It could just be a font size change, but it will make a difference.
Absolutely. In future, can a large advertising network plug your app, your software into it, your technology into it?
Yes, in fact, that's what we are looking at.
Being acquired by Google, for example, like that would be, for them,
right?
Like, that would help optimize the front end of
course, yes,
the ad planning, right?
Right.
Okay, so I guess one thing people may be thinking is, surely Google are doing this already. They're smart, right?
Right. So in fact, right now, Google actually has its own like a generation of ads for people who want to put up online advertisements. They can actually use some very simple generation. But the generation is not about design consideration. It's a very simple where you choose a certain image, type in your own text, and then it creates a template for you, which is then put online. So I'm going a step further. I'm saying that the content actually really matters, down to the minute details, the kind of words we use, the taglines we are outputting, the kind of design decisions that are made in the design of an advertisement is very, very important. Okay,
good. Shall we talk about your journey as a company in terms of where you are and what happens next?
Sure.
Obviously, everything is subject to change on this pitch.
Right.
But if I was to just just scroll towards the end, you have the raise and the situation of where you are with Luminaire. If we sort of go down to the last few, we've changed. I mean, okay, so let me ask you, okay, we've got the investor partners in here as well. Well, I'll ask you now that you're sitting here, where are you in your development cycle? Where are you in your fundraising and what happens next?
Sure. So right now we are still at a pre-seed stage. We have got funding from ESG as well as co-funding by Space Ventures. So right now we are actually in the phase of finalizing our MVP. So in terms of the MVP, we are putting all our efforts in making sure that it's accurate, that it can generate the kind of advertising to the quality that I expect as a designer. And right now we are actually delivering the MVP first before we move into a seed stage round. Right.
Okay. Timeline-wise?
Timeline-wise, we're looking at maybe somewhere April or May next year.
What, complete the MVP?
Actually, we would launch... the MVP is actually used by some of our customers already, but we are still trying to perfect it. So we are getting and doing some iterations along the way because there's a lot of testing involved.
Right.
So that's the entire process. I expect that to be, to the level of satisfaction by May. And then we are looking at a seed round at a point in time.
Okay. So seed rounds, second quarter next year?
Second quarter next year, yes.
Yeah. I mean, do you have your numbers ready yet? Is it too early? Have you got an idea?
It's a bit too early because we have not finalized the numbers. It actually depends a lot on the MVP progress in the next 2 to 3 months. But I think Q2 for next year sounds about right for a seed stage fundraising round.
Yeah.
So right now, because all our resources are just spent on the development of the MVP.
Yeah. And what would be the main goal of your fundraise in Q2. What would that be to fund? Would that be to build
Right. So
an
actually,
outreach?
yeah. So right now, the plan for 2019 at least is actually to have a good outreach and a good customer base in Singapore. So I think a large amount of that fundraising would be spent in hiring employees, specifically in the sales department, for example, to outreach, and also engineering talent to actually help us iterate the product along the way. So other than that, in 2020, we actually plan to scale regionally.
Yeah.
So then that would be a good time for the next fundraise after the seed stage.
Yeah, sure. So your team currently, you met at university.
Yes.
There was a slide originally in the pitch deck. I don't know if you got that still in the. Okay, we do. If we go up a couple, one more. Yeah, founding team. We just spend a couple of minutes talking about that because it's also important.
Sure.
Because it gives us an understanding of who comes next, what kind of people you're looking for.
Right.
So you've established that you met in the at university.
Right.
Your role in all of this, obviously you're a founder.
Yeah.
What do you do day to day in Lumin?
So I take on the role of the CEO, which is going for business development. So basically right now I'm handling all the sales, development of business, financials, everything like that. Trying to get our name there on the startup ecosystem. Actually, my co-founders, they're all on the technical side.
Yeah.
So I'm actually quite fortunate that I have 3 very strong technical co-founders, because I think the basis of starting any AI-related business is you need very technically strong person. You need people who can execute on the vision. I think that's very, very important. So in fact, I have very good technical co-founders, which I'm very satisfied with. So my job primarily is to sell the vision, because then this is tied directly to my research that I'm doing now as well. So what I'm doing is I'm testing the hypothesis of my research in the real world. And doing it in the form of startup.
Yeah. Does that have any sort of issues with the fact that, when you leave university, people may then decide that they're going to go, sometimes, university teams split and go their own way. I mean, what sort of your thoughts with succession there?
So I think the most important thing is that for any entrepreneur, at least at the beginning stage, is to get the people believing in the idea of your vision. And I believe that I managed to get all these technically competent people on board because the vision is sound. And I'm passionate about this. So I don't see any issues after leaving university, because I think we see ourselves more as Team Luminaire than, just people who are connected based on...
Yeah, because some people do startups at university because it's part of their course. Right.
Okay. So this is completely not part of any course.
It's good to establish
self-initiated.
That, sometimes listeners and viewers don't know that, so they need to understand, right? Especially if they're investors, because it's a risk to them, isn't it? Moving forward, the kind of people you want in your team, do you have specific hard skills that you're looking for? Is there a mindset that you want?
So of course, for the technical development or product development side, we are looking for people with good skills in terms of coding. Specifically for AI coding, we use a lot of Python and R. For the sales and business development side, of course, ideally people who are actually passionate about seeing this vision and excitement of how creativity is being disrupted by AI, and just people who actually love this industry.
Yeah, what industry? You mean in terms of AI
the
or
creative industry and
right.
the AI industry.
So, I mean, that's important because people want to know, oh, look, I don't know anything about AI, but I've spent 10 years in creatives.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Those are the kind of people.
Because like I said, at the very start, the AI still needs a period of time to learn what is good aesthetics. Yeah. So the more people that could join us that has very good creative background, the more the AI can learn from actually some of the viewpoints. Yeah. Because the AI is just like a person. It learns from its experiences and the people it surrounds itself with.
Okay, and the culture of Luminaire, I mean, obviously the 4 co-founders are key in setting that culture. Yeah. You're at university, so you're doing your studies as well, I guess.
I'm doing my research.
Yeah. So what would it be like for somebody coming into that? It's going to be slightly different to a startup in a co-working space.
Of course, yeah.
So what do they need to know? And what do they need to know also about what your working culture is like?
I think in terms of working culture, we are quite open to suggestions or feedback. We are actually also very research-driven. So in fact, if you look at some of my other members, they are all PhDs in computer engineering. So I think fundamentally we approach a lot of the problems in AI space based a lot on research. So if you're somebody that likes to look into the details, likes to get into research journals and all that very geeky stuff, I think we cater to that a lot. And also for myself, I've always enjoyed startup ecosystems and cultures and all that. So I think it's a good mix between hard research and running a startup. So it's the excitement of running a startup day to day, and also the backing of knowing that what you're doing is making a difference, because this is all based on research.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been fascinating hearing about your your journey, Han, and what you're trying to do as well, because there is a lot of talk of AI these days.
Right.
Less so in the space that you're in.
Right.
Because, like we've established, it's not necessarily what people put together. They use AI for, like crunching data in large organizations, which effectively is what you're doing, but you're applying it to the creative space as well. And there is a real problem out there. And, that is a problem which maybe, we've talked about, for example, advertising agents and creative agencies. They're not going away anywhere. I mean, they're evolving, right? And you look at like the WPPs and so on. They're constantly like acquiring technologies and people who can fit into their portfolios. And it'd be interesting to see who really picks up on what you're doing the fastest. Whether it is like those large ad networks like the Googles, for example, or the large advertising conglomerates like the WPPs, because they both kind of need it. But who recognizes that need first?
Yeah.
So that's going to be an interesting story moving forward, right? So
right. In fact, a lot of the ad agencies now, they are shifting a lot of their assets into digital as well. They're slowly transforming themselves sort of from an agency model into a tech model. Yeah. Because what works in the modern day is running your business, no matter what industry, like a tech company.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's going to be a fascinating story moving forward. So, Hannah, hopefully we can get an update on your progress as well at some point in 2019. Right. So obviously the MVP, the raise, what happens next? Because once you have that raise in as well, now you need to start seriously thinking about outreach and getting it out there and knocking on the doors and selling this to all those ad agencies and brands out there who could make use of your platform. Phay, everybody, founder of Lumin, wishing you all the best with your ongoing journey and all the best with your studies as well. And let's not forget.
Thank you so much.
It's a big part of what you're doing as well. Yes. What would be the best way for people to reach out to you? Those that may be potential investors, potential partners, even potential team members.
Oh, sure. Just go to our website, www.luminaire-ai.com. So whether you're an investor, just someone interested in the product, or looking for a career, you can just drop us an email on the pages on the site.
Exactly. And tell them that you watched this interview as well, because it says a lot. I mean, if somebody's paid attention to your story and learned about your why, it really gives you a good indication that they're fully in with the vision of what you're doing. Right.
Right.
Phay, everybody, thank you very much.
Thank you.